As you might have noticed, the issue of congressional stock trading has hit the headlines recently, with many upset at how much politicians have been making while in office. So a whole load of senators from both sides of the aisle have recently proposed legislation, and it's possible we'll see something this congressional session. For this video, we actually interviewed Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff to talk through his most recent proposal. Our Patreon backers got access to the unedited version of this video just moments after we stopped recording. If you want that kind of access, sign up to the Patreon and support TLDR today. It's linked below. Prior to 2012, there were basically no restrictions on congressional stock trading. Politicians in Congress could trade whatever stocks they liked, based on whatever information they received. All they had to do was disclose their financial interests once a year in accordance with the Ethics and Governments Act of 1978. This was essentially because, while there wasn't an explicit exemption for politicians, US insider trading law was so complicated and confusing that legal scholars couldn't agree on the lawfulness of congressional stock trading. Politicians and government officials obviously had access to non-public information, but they weren't quite company insiders per se, so in the end no one bothered investigating them. Amazingly, neither the Securities and Exchange Commission nor the Department of Justice ever brought an insider trading action against a member of Congress. This clearly seems a bit dodgy. For starters, it feels both unfair and illegal. Surely using material, non-public information to make money trading stocks counts as insider trading. And if it doesn't, why should politicians be exempt from legislation that applies to the rest of us? But even worse, it creates bad incentives for legislators. If there were no restrictions on congressional stock trading, politicians are encouraged to pass legislation that either protects their current investments or creates an opportunity for them to make tons of money on the stock market. And in many cases, this is unlikely to be the legislation that's best for the American public. This was all supposed to change with the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge, or STOCK Act, passed by Obama in 2012. Essentially, the STOCK Act banned members of Congress from using private information for personal benefit, and required them to publicly file and disclose any financial transaction of stocks, bonds, or commodities futures, and other securities within 45 days. Now, the STOCK Act wasn't anything new. It was actually first introduced to Congress in 2004, when it received just 6 sponsors before being thrown out. The act was only passed in 2012 after congressional stock trading caught the public's interest, largely thanks to a 60-minute segment aired in November of 2011. The 60-minute segment, titled Congress, Trading Stocks on Insider Information, focused on 3 members of Congress. Republican Congressman Spencer Barkus, who was publicly telling everyone the market was going to be fine when privately betting against it in the build-up to the financial crash. Republican Congressman John Boehner, the then House Minority Leader, who bought health insurance stock before announcing that the public option proposal was going to be scrapped, and Nancy Pelosi, who secured preferential access to Visa's 2008 IPO. Anyway, the point is that by 2012, the public had taken issue with congressional stock trading, which is why Congress then finally passed the Stock Act. The act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The Senate approved it by a 96-3 vote, and the House of Representatives by a 417-2 vote. Unfortunately, while the Stock Act might have been a good idea in principle, in practice it's been pretty ineffective. For starters, the fine for failing to report trades is just $200, which is pocket change for most members of Congress. This is probably why, according to Business Insider, 57 members of Congress have violated the law anyway. Second, while the Stock Act did make congressional insider trading illegal, this is generally pretty hard to prove, which is why no charges have ever been brought against a member of Congress under the provision. Third, the law doesn't apply to family members, which means that members of Congress can just get their nearest and dearest to do their insider trading for them. Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul, for example, made $5.3 million after buying shares in big tech companies just before his wife took part in a vote on an antitrust bill. Anyway, the issue of congressional stock trading hit the financial headlines again after a report by Twitter account Unusual Whales detailed how, despite the Stock Act, congressional portfolios performed suspiciously well in 2021. According to the report, Congress made literally hundreds of millions of dollars in stock trade and beat the S&P 500 thanks to some suspiciously well-timed trades. Senator Tommy Tuberville, for example, made a lot of money from Alcoa Corp in late 2021 during intense negotiations on Biden's infrastructure bill, and Senator David Perdue bought Pfizer stock in late February, a few weeks before their vaccine deal was announced. Anyway, in response, various members of Congress from both sides of the aisle have proposed legislation banning all congressional stock trading. One such proposal comes from Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, who we actually interviewed for this video. Here he is explaining his bill and how he considers it a rare opportunity for bipartisanship in Congress.
It does present a chance at bipartisanship, and let me just set the table for your viewers by introducing them to the concept here. Members of Congress are currently permitted to trade stocks while in office. My view is that members of Congress, elected officials, should not be playing the stock market while we make federal policy and while we have extraordinary access to privileged and confidential information. About 80% of the public agrees with that position. Well, now, as you mentioned, we have bipartisan support in the Senate and the House. We have indications of supportive engagement from the leaders in the Senate and the House. And I think it is an opportunity to get beyond the partisan polarization that so afflicts American politics. And even though this specific reform, banning members of Congress from trading stock, may in and of itself it's limited, right? It's important, it's substantive, but it's limited. There's also a bigger picture here, which is that reformism, anti-corruption, presents an opportunity for us to break through partisan polarization and unite unlikely coalitions toward reforming institutions that need to be cleaned up.
So this sounds like a pretty good idea, right? Blind trusts would remove those bad incentives we talked about earlier, while allowing politicians to keep their assets. Somewhat unsurprisingly though, Ossoff has faced some resistance. First, that any stock trading ban amounts to a violation of politicians' rights to participate in the free market. And second, that a stock trading ban would negatively impact the quality of senators by making the job less appealing. We asked Ossoff what he thought about these objections, and well, he wasn't convinced.
I think that those concerns are not persuasive. If someone desperately needs to be trading stocks on the stock market, then they don't have to run for office. The idea that that would somehow dissuade someone who would otherwise seek to engage in public service from running, I think, is unpersuasive. This is really a pretty straightforward ethics question. Do we want and expect, and should the American people be able to trust that elected officials are not benefiting improperly from all of the information that we have access to, and that we're putting the public interest ahead of our private financial interest? This is something that we already require senior officials in the executive branch to do.
On the other side, some people have suggested that having assets in a blind trust would still create a bad incentive for politicians to protect their current investments, and instead we should just ban politicians from owning securities altogether. On this one, Ossoff seemed pretty open.
Well, Senator Warren and Senator Daines have offered legislation to do that, and I think it's a smart proposal. And I think both of these proposals achieve the fundamental objective, which is to stop members of Congress from trading stock. If that legislation's on the floor, I'm going to vote for it.
Finally, we asked Ossoff if he'd support a lifetime lobbying ban for politicians who leave Congress. If you'd like us to do a video on this topic, by the way, just let us know in the comments down below. Here, Ossoff was pretty unequivocal.
That's a no-brainer, and the answer is yes. And you see a lot of folks who serve in Congress and then they leave and they become lobbyists. And this presents all kinds of conflict of interest, because if members of Congress expect that they might pursue a career in lobbying after they serve, that affects how they're going to approach relationships and powerful vested interests while they're in power.
So that's the latest idea for congressional stock trading, a blind trust for pre-existing assets. Is this a good idea? And will it improve trust in Congress? Or will politicians find a way around it, as they did with the Stock Act? Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and thanks and a happy birthday to Senator Jon Ossoff for helping us make it.
And we can't finish without wishing you a happy birthday. I believe you turned 35 today, which is an important age for US politics. So do you have any exciting plans for the rest of your birthday today or even the next few years?
Well, not only is today my birthday, but tomorrow is my wife Alicia's birthday. So we're going to celebrate. We have a 2-month-old baby daughter at home, and I'm looking forward to having some time with family this weekend. I really appreciate y'all reaching out. It's great to reach an audience on YouTube other than through traditional media. I checked out some of your videos. It's cool stuff. Thank you for helping to inform, the broader public of what's going on. As you know, I used to work in journalism, and I really respect that you guys are making an effort to expand access to important information about current events. Would love to come back and join you another time.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your birthday, Senator.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
As I said at the start, Patreons got early access to this and a bunch of other stuff, like early access to videos, the ability to vote on video topics, and behind the scenes updates. So if you want all of that too, then be sure to sign up now. You might even see your name at the end of videos just like these people. As always, the link's in the description.